Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Friday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern, I host eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest this week for our 120th episode is Hounsell. Al is Senior Innovation Lawyer with Norton Fulbright, Canada. He is, as I said, a senior lawyer and innovation leader responsible for leading client innovation and the Norton Fulbright, Canada Innovation Solutions Development team. He's working at the intersection of law and innovation. You can tell where we're going with this episode this week. Directing strategic and legal advice to clients and lawyers in a variety of types of matters, including, for example, AI-assisted due diligence, regulatory compliance management, and a host of other areas. He is a licensed lawyer, entrepreneur, and seasoned coder with an extensive background with full-stack software development, having built innovative technologies for a number of tech startups prior to and during his studies at Osgood Hall Law School and the Schulich, if I pronounced that correctly, School of Business. Al, welcome.
Thanks, George.
Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. And you pronounced everything perfectly.
Even the name of the business school. All right.
Schulich School of Business.
Well, as I gave a preview, we're here to talk innovation today, because you are, after all, the innovation leader at NRF Canada. I'd like to start though with how you got to that position. What brought you there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people in these kinds of roles came to that role through really interesting, through an interesting path. And so I was no different. I had built a number of companies. I dabbled in real estate development and investment, and was kind of a lost soul in some ways, in that I enjoyed running these little businesses and got a lot of value from that. But I also felt like I really want to make a more pronounced impact in the business world. I want to learn how to do business properly. I want to, understand how these different organizations in society function. And I sort of felt like I was just kind of floating on my own running these little companies. And so I decided I need to figure out how to run a business properly. So I'm going to go to business school. And along the way, I decided, it's an extra year or two to also get a JD degree. And so I'm going to go to law school as well. And that's going to give me lots of potential avenues that I could take after that. And that's sort of how I wound up in this kind of a role in Canada. In order to become fully licensed as a lawyer, you have to practice for a year. And the law firms come to the school and they recruit and offer you jobs and make it really easy. And I felt like, I should really do this. I should close the loop and practice for a year, become a full lawyer, without really a huge intention on staying in the practice of law. But during that year of practice, I discovered this area of legal technology. And I thought, there is incredible opportunity in this industry. The legal industry in many ways is lagging behind other industries, but it creates this massive opportunity for innovation and doing things in a new way and incorporating technology in the things that we do. And I felt like this is an opportunity to be an entrepreneur within an organization that's within a broader industry that is just ripe for innovation. And I haven't looked back since.
So when you say this area of legal technology, how broadly or narrowly are you defining that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's funny. I teach a course at Osgood now on legal innovation, and the title of that course was the same title from 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't know how far it goes back, but the topics in that course previously were how to use Microsoft Word in order to help your legal practice, sending emails and filtering through. Like, it's just drastically changed since then. And so if you define it broadly, really, literally everything we do touches on legal technology. But I think the biggest impacts for technology are these tools that are being created to help make specifically the practice of law become more efficient, to specifically offer that greater value to clients and to streamline a lot of the legal processes in particular. So beyond just general technology being used in law, technology that is purpose built for the practice of law.
So you're talking a wide swath of technology then, not just e-discovery, but across the spectrum of the practice of law. Is that right?
That's right. So we do touch on e-discovery, but it's one small component of what an innovation function would look at. For us, we try to make use of e-discovery tools in the process of a data breach and cyber breach review. That falls, in our particular organization, that falls under innovation. But there's a whole lot of other technology that falls under our purview.
Okay, I'm just trying to switch cameras here, but no success in higher quality because my camera's being weird. So much for innovation on my part. So you are an innovation lawyer. What is an innovation lawyer? Is it? Yeah.
That's a good question. It can be defined very differently in different organizations. I think the commonality between how different law firms use the term is that you've got a trained lawyer who is focused on making processes more efficient. And so that will often involve things like document automation and other technology tools where there's this fusion of your legal knowledge with some technical expertise in order to automate different processes.
So that's the innovation lawyer. Is that broader or narrower, or how is that different from innovation generally?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the innovation lawyer, and my title doesn't really match up completely with what I do day to day in leading teams that are doing this kind of thing. But the innovation lawyer is part of this overall innovation framework within a law firm, where I'm focused on strategic innovation and legal design. And innovation broadly in any organization, really, I think can be defined in three main components. The first is creativity, fostering creative ideas and ideation to think about things differently and come up with just this positive attitude that things can be done better. There's a better way. We can make clients more happy. We can make our processes more efficient. So fostering that creativity. The second component is what I call experimental implementation. So it's not just a bunch of ideas that just sort of sit there. You've got to take those and the best of them and implement them somehow. And the way that an innovation function does implementation is through an experimental approach. We think about what are the assumptions we're making about this particular idea or this particular product that we want to move forward with. What are those assumptions, and how do we front load the riskiest of those assumptions first and test those assumptions? What experiments can we design that will help us remove some of the risk in this implementation? So experimental implementation is the second. And then the last is pretty straightforward, and that's value capture. We want to make sure that we are accurately capturing the value that innovation is bringing, whether it's a client-facing product or solution or service that's being designed, or whether it's an internal solution that's being designed. We want to make sure that the value is clear that's being offered by the innovation function and it's being captured appropriately.
Creativity, at least technological creativity, is not a phrase necessarily first of mind when people think of law firms. But you very much have that role there. How does that work?
It's a good question. I think the assumption of people is that maybe law firms aren't as creative as like the Googles and the Netflix and the Ubers of the world. But lawyers are actually very, very creative people. I think the interesting step that needs to be taken within a law firm is to give the freedom and give the permission to be creative outside of the bounds of what we're constantly told. This is what legal service delivery is. This is how things are done. This is the way that we do things, because the legal industry in many ways is built upon precedent. This is what was decided before, and then we have slow incremental change on top of precedent. And lawyers' minds can sometimes be wired that way, but within those bounds, there's a high amount of creativity while you're looking to solve problems that clients have. And, it's going from one problem solving situation to another. There's this fast paced problem solving, but it's within very clear boundaries. And so that creativity is there in law firms, but the encouragement that the innovation function can give is to think outside of those parameters and try to see the whole problem, try to see the whole client experience from a different vantage point, perhaps. And through that, we can come to some of the breakthrough innovation ideas that can be really, exciting to clients, quite frankly.
So if you could walk me through an innovation exercise at NRF Canada. I mean, I don't care what it is, but what would that process look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll give you an example of a client innovation that was quite successful and has done really well with that client. We had a financial institution that came to us and said, we have this need to institute this loan program. And as part of this program, we want to move what we can off of the plate of the legal team and allow more of the business to be involved in this loan program, because the legal team can often be a bottleneck to being able to get these deals done and being able to manage this really high volume of deals. And so where that journey began was just sitting down with the client and trying to understand the problem. I think one of the things that innovation teams need to avoid is getting so excited about a particular solution or a particular, new technology, for example, that it becomes this solution in need of a problem and you try to shoehorn it into processes. In talking about the innovation function and our process, we really want to try and start with a problem and start with the people that have this problem. Understand everything we can about what is the problem, where does it happen, who has this problem, when do they have this problem, and really flesh out an understanding of what it is that is the pain point that either the client or the internal user has. So we'll start at that point and we'll take our time, which can sometimes, be a little bit, it's a different pace than sort of the fast-paced law, solve the problem. You've got to slow down and you've got to take time to fully understand. And so from there, we begin thinking about, okay, what are all the different ways that we could address this pain point? How can we help streamline these processes with the client? How can we help move this work off of the plate of legal while at the same time avoiding any potential legal risk that could come out of doing that? And so then we go into this ideation phase. And the goal of the ideation phase really is to be as divergent as possible, to get as many ideas on the page as you possibly can. And sometimes lawyers can struggle with this because we're often thinking about risk and thinking about what are the problems that could happen with something. And so being very problem focused can sometimes cause people to self-filter a lot. And you can filter out potentially good ideas because you're being overly critical about them. But at this ideation phase, we want to be divergent as possible, get as many ideas as we can on the page in order to think about what are all the ways we could address this problem. Then we move into, again, as I said, the experimental implementation phase. And in the case of a client innovation, the client is very deeply embedded in that process. We want to get something in front of them as soon as we can, whether it's mock-ups, an early prototype, and get feedback in terms of how we can adjust the potential offering. And so in this case, we had many rounds of feedback with the client. And eventually we come up with a product that really seems to fit like a glove, their process and their concerns and their strategy. And then it's a matter of just deploying it and making sure that things run really well and we have the right people in place to support the product and be able to manage that. And so, thousands of requests and searches and registrations and hundreds of loans have gone through this program where business users can fill in a simple questionnaire that generates between 15 and 25 different complex legal documents. And it's been a massive success, but it really comes through being disciplined about that process, understanding the problem, taking the time to ideate, and then in an experimental way, putting things in front of your end user as soon as you can in order to make sure that you're hitting the mark.
From the very initial stages when someone suggested, here's a problem, we're in need of a solution, up through the point where you had a tool that could actually be used on the client's behalf, how long did that take?
Yeah, it really depends. So I don't want to give a number and say this is the time that it takes, but in that particular case, the loan documents were of such a high complexity that there were literally months that it took to code those loan documents just on their own. Then there's the workflow layer built on top of that. A lot of the workflow tools I have found that we've either deployed for clients or internally have been ones where the build time is maybe 15% of the overall time, where the bulk of that is spent talking with people and putting it in front of them and meeting with them and asking them, how does this hit the mark? Asking a lot of questions, watching them use it and that kind of thing. The build time is often a small minority of the total time that goes into this if you really want to make sure you're hitting the mark with a client need.
I mean, that makes sense. It takes a while to figure out the root problem you're trying to address, I would think, and figuring out as well how you might go about doing it satisfactorily. So this one was months long. Are there others that are, say, weeks long, years
Absolutely.
long? What's the curve look like?
Absolutely. So one of the initiatives that we took part in, I think shortly after I started in this kind of role, is we realized we're getting so many of these requests from clients that we need a way to be able to deploy things faster. We need to be able to cut down on some of the build time, and not just in the sense of building out the final solution. We need something that allows us to iterate really quickly and pivot really quickly. And so we've deployed a number of no-code platforms internally now that allows us to put something in front of clients really quick and iterate on that. And in some cases, we may have to go and do the full coding for certain aspects of it that the no-code tool can't do. But because of some of these no-code tools, it really has brought down the average implementation time for a small workflow project to in the range of weeks rather than months.
Clearly, from the way you talk about this, you are not the only person. You're a member of a team. What does that team look like, both in terms of the number of people and the makeup of the team?
Yeah, so we have a fairly small team really at NRF Canada. I think overall we have around 7 or 8 people that are involved in sort of this innovation function. I have a few developers that work directly with me to do some of this building. We have project managers on the team that will help project manage things like the cyber breach due diligence. document review, that kind of thing. Some of the design thinking workshops that we'll try to lead, we'll have some project managers involved with that. So it's a relatively small team. And so we do rely quite heavily on the technology tools that allow us to iterate quickly, using Figma to produce mock-ups in order to get it in front of the end user right away, using the no-code tools to get an early version running in order to see how people interact with it and how it gets used.
As you go through the process, there have to be highs and lows, successes and pitfalls. What are some of the pitfalls to be aware of with something like this?
I think I've touched on the biggest one, which is to not fall in love with the solution, but fall in love with the problem. And it can't be stressed enough. I think because of the culture of law firms where we are in this fast-paced environment that is constantly solving problems as efficiently as possible, then move on to the next, solve problems efficiently as possible, it is very important to balance the desire to move fast with the need to fully understand the problem. It can become easy to think we understand, run forward, build something, and then you see, this isn't getting the usage that we thought it was going to get internally. Why is that? And then, of course, the answer is, oh, well, it needs this feature. Okay, so we'll build this feature. And then it needs another feature. We'll build that feature. And then we're still asking, why isn't it getting the usage that we were hoping that it would get? And you step back and you ask, well, what is the problem that this tool is addressing? And so there is that pitfall there for sure. So one is the temptation to move fast. The other thing is the temptation to just go for the next shiny thing. That, oh, here's the latest technology and AI is such a buzzword. Let's use AI and these kinds of things, right? Which are wonderful if they are solving a strategic issue or a real pain point that the organization has. And so we always want to start with that problem and allow technology to facilitate the solutions to those problems.
It's the classic hammer and screw problem, right?
Yeah.
It might be a great hammer, but it's not going to get the screw in the wood very well.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, what makes for a success besides just the opposite of what you just said?
Yeah, so I think I've already talked about our process. We really try to be disciplined in our process in terms of generating lots of ideas, the way we assess it according to a scorecard, the way that we implement it in an experimental approach. But assuming all that's in place, there are unique aspects to a law firm that are especially relevant to be effective as an innovation function. And a couple of those are, number one is alignment with the strategic objectives of the organization. There absolutely has to be that alignment. What is the organization trying to be? And how can innovation come alongside those strategic goals in order to help it be better at what it wants to be? So that's number one. It's not just about being your own kind of innovation silo and here's all our shiny tools and we can build this and build that. We really need to be embedded in that. And the second is similar along this concept of embedding is relationship. You know, a partnership is not like a traditional organization that's highly hierarchical, that's focused on long-term shareholder value. It's very much a relational organization. Instead of one captain of the ship, you've got 150 captains of the ship, right? And there are unique opportunities and unique challenges with that, and building strong relationships in order to have a great pipeline of ideas and a great base in order to test and experiment, I think is very important. When you have that relational capital within the organization, then there's that leeway to say, okay, let's think outside of the bounds a little bit. Let's try something new. We've got a lot of opportunities that have a high probability of success, but are more incremental in nature. Let's also have a few things in our innovation portfolio that are a little more risky, will minimize those risks, but have the potential for breakthrough innovation. And when you've got that relational capital, there's more room for those kinds of things in order to really add that long-term value to the organization. So I would emphasize those things: strategic alignment and strong relationships.
As you look down the road, to the extent you can share this or are comfortable sharing this with us, what do you see? What's next?
It's funny because a lot of people have gone before me and made predictions that haven't come true, and I've got predictions that I'm sure are not going to come true. But I think when I think about where the legal industry is going, I have to go back to the voice of the client. We really try to spend lots of time listening to clients and hearing what are their pain points and what do they want. And what we're hearing is that clients want transparency. They want to be able to see transparently where's the matter and how is that matter tracking against the overall project. Where is the budget and where are the finances for the matter and how is that tracking against the overall budget? How can I see up to the minute information that helps provide me with cost certainty? Along that same line of cost certainty, how can we structure projects in a way that give that cost certainty to clients? And then the second thing that we're hearing is clients want business partners. We don't just want legal advice delivered from on high, from the ivory tower of, legislative sources, and here is the legal information, do with it what you will. We want law firms to come alongside us who understand our business and understand the strategic aims of our organization and come along as partners to help us achieve those strategic aims. And legal advice is one component, but the way that advice is delivered and the way it's packaged and the way that it's interpreted in order to facilitate the aims of the organization, I think we're going to see a lot of change in the years to come as law firms reposition as placing the client voice as primary in their organization and aligning as partners for their clients.
You've got a lot on your plate there, a lot going on, a team that has to be incredibly busy with what you're doing. How do you compare with other law firms? Do you see other firms taking similar approaches, different approaches, looking at you and saying, no, we're not going there? Well, what's it look like out there?
If you asked me that a few years ago, I would say maybe we're kind of in that territory that we're not sure. Is this something that other law firms are going to jump on as well in the Canadian market? Answering that question now, the answer is very clear. This is where law firms are going. And it's very validating to look at how different law firms are implementing these kinds of processes within their organizations and thinking, okay, we're on the right track here. We do want to be pioneers in some ways, but we also want to do it in a way that minimizes any potential risk that's involved with that. And so this experimental approach is something that I think we're going to see a lot more of in law firms because it really minimizes your downside risk, but enables you to move forward and potentially breakthrough innovation projects.
And how do you think you compare with your cousins south of the border?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I feel like in some ways, if we go across the pond to Europe, we're playing catch up to a lot of what's happening in the innovation space in Europe. And then when you look to the US market, there are, I think, different concerns. Like in some ways, the US market is just so massively profitable and flush with cash over the past few years that there's almost less of a need to really push innovation. But at the same time, you're seeing some really cool stuff happening in US firms. Our US colleagues just launched LX Studio, which is designed at fostering really interesting partnerships and being able to do things outside of the realm of legal advice. And you see similar things in other law firms. So I really think we're all kind of in this together and trying to find out how can law firms really maximize value for our clients and align strategically with them in a way that maybe pushes the boundaries of traditional legal service offerings.
Well, I think that's a good note to stop on, because who doesn't want to stop with pushing boundaries legal service offerings. Thanks, Al. Al Hounsell is Senior Innovation Lawyer with Norton Rose Fulbright, Canada. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Al, thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, George.